Good evening, everyone. So here we are in about the end of the first day of the 7-day retreat. Um, this is such a special opportunity for us to practice, and it's has a special quality about it, even among other Rohatsu retreats that I've been in this year, because this year is the last time that we're going to have a 24/7 formalized Rohatsu retreat here at the Abbey. And I have so many memories about practicing here, and not just here, but also predecessor locations in Lafayette Zen Center, and then some of you practiced in Boulder prior to that, before I joined as a member. And there's so much skillful means of teaching that the Roshis brought here through the years, brought me personally, just very transformative teachings. I remember Roshi one time telling me when I was complimenting him about a dharma talk, and he said, I don't want to be inspirational. I want to transform people's lives. And that was just not long after I became a student here. And he and Roshi Shinko have certainly done that over and over again. And one other thing I want to mention is I've been living here for the last 2 years. Moved in the day before Halloween 2 years ago, and I was going through a difficult time in my life and needed a place to stay. And with no warning at all, I asked him if I could do that. Asked Roshi Shinko and Shishin Roshi about that, and they didn't bat an eyelash, and they said absolutely, and of course welcomed me like any beloved family member. Maybe just nurtured me and made me feel so good. And so a lot that I have great appreciation for. And another thing that I heard Shishin Roshi talk about not long ago was he was talking about like energy in our practice, and energy resonating in these walls. And I can feel that. Walk in that Zendo, you can feel it when you get on these grounds. I can feel it. I feel it when I come in this room. And just think of all the hours and all the stillness that has taken place and been in this space over the years here. Actually, I can still feel that when I drive down Sparta Drive in Lafayette, where the center was before. It has just a certain energy about it. And I think that's I know it's a real thing. It's a palpable thing. I can feel it here too. So anyway, just encourage everyone, including myself, to make the most of this week in particular. Again, although it's melancholy for me, absolutely, it's also just a time of incredible gratitude for the last 20 some years that I've had the opportunity to learn from our teachers and learn in this, and most recently in this beautiful setting. So tonight I want to talk about practice. Okay, I want to talk about our practice, and I want to talk about how practice can change us and can change who we are, and do this in ways that perhaps we never expected. So I'm going to give some examples from my life. I'll briefly talk a little bit about how I came to practice, and then I also want to talk, though, about how some of the ways that practice has impacted my life and continues to affect my life on a daily basis that I never anticipated at all, and certainly wasn't anything I sought after when I first came to meditation and to Zen practice. When I first came to practice, I was driven by a couple things. Didn't know anything about Zen. Didn't really. I'd done some yoga in years past, but didn't have any really much of a spiritual background from a standpoint of Zen. That's for sure. And so um, when but I was dealing with a difficult circumstance in particular with my dad, whose health was declining, and he was starting to show signs of dementia, and then they pretty rapidly progressed to where he had quite severe dementia, and that was really hard for me to take. I don't know what I what I was thinking, but I had sort of really never really thought that my dad was going to get old, I guess, and get sick and die, or that he'd have dementia or anything like that. Somebody I really looked up to, and he was a wonderful, wonderful father. But also, I realized too that that created a lot of anxiety in me, his declining health, and I realized that I'd been hiding from my anxiety for years. I'd mask it in different ways, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted the pain to go away. I wanted my anxiety to go away. My fears about my my dad and about what that meant and my own mortality. Of course, that was really pricking right at my own worries about mortality for sure. And so that's when I came first to have an interest in trying to learn more about meditation, and then eventually found my way to the Great Mountain Zen Center at that time that was in Lafayette, and just found about in the newspaper and the Boulder Camera. Showed up one morning, and I think then it started at like 5:30. The sittings on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, I believe. Didn't know any of the protocols. Didn't know anyone there. Never sat with the group before. Didn't know anything about Zen other than a couple of chapters I'd read out of one of Joko's books that I found very intriguing. So I showed up. My stomach was gurgling. I was nervous. I was anxious, and felt very uncomfortable. And I think that we sat from I think like 5:30 to 7. It might have been 5:45 to 7:30, something like that. But that was a long time for me to sit. That's for sure. But when I was done, I went down to the foyer to get my coat to leave for work, and Roshi met me there, and he said, "Well, what did you think?" And I said, "Man, I loved it, and I did." And I said, "But I didn't really know. Like I heard that a bell ring, and I heard people leave and then come back, and of course I didn't know about bowing or what I now know is kinhin or whatever like that. Doesn't know anything about that." And he said, "Well, don't get too concerned about that. Just focus on sitting right now, right?" So that was comforting to me to hear. But at that time, I didn't really have the ability to come often. So whenever I could come back to the GMCC there in Lafayette, it was quite the treat. It was really special for me. And then over time, things changed in my personal life. I was able to do that, and I just continued to grow my relationship with the center and my love and affection for Zen practice. So that's how I got into it. But one of the things I wanted to mention was when I was first getting into Zen, then, and I think this is very typical of many people probably, and perhaps some of you, is I was drawn to it because I had a particular need, something that I felt lacking in who I was in my life, and I was thinking that this practice, which I knew just minuscule amounts about, but began to learn more as I came to the Great Mountain Zen Center. As I began to learn more, I thought, okay, this can help me with some of these things like my anxiety and all that. But I tended to view it more of it was a me thing. I had these issues. I had these needs. I was coming from this place of lack, and this Zen Center could address it for me, and the Roshis could address it for me, right? And they could address a lot of what I was needing at that time. Absolutely, they could. But it was still something that I was looking at myself pretty much from I was flawed. I had serious issues, and I needed help, and Zen could provide it for me with the help of my teachers. That was where I was coming from. That was exactly where I was coming from. And So what I want to talk to you about tonight, though, is about how our practice again can change who we are, and in ways we never expected at all. And one of the changes, kind of an overarching change that I began to notice over time, and this was not like in a day or two, this was over years and continues certainly, and is continuing right now. It's always happening and changing and transforming life, but for me. But one of the things was I went from having this notion of something that this practice, it's something that I would utilize to fix my issues, right? To, and I'll give you some examples of things that it has impacted greatly in my life. To, it was almost like, certainly in that kind of approach of me needing help from Zen to address my anxiety, things like that, that was pretty formulaic. That was that was very, getting guidance and teachings and things really helped me, not overnight, but I could see progress right away as far as being able to handle certain kinds of life situations much more comfortably. But over time, as I noticed other things that were changing in my life, these were things that were not anything that I particularly sought after when I got into practice. In fact, I wouldn't even have considered or thought of these things at all. And yet they begin to pop up. And these are things I'll share with you tonight. And it was almost like, the practice was, instead of me doing the practice, it was sort of like the practice was, practicing me. It was doing me. And I think that's exactly what was happening. I think that's what still happens. And that was kind of startling, and still is, but I'm very grateful for it, because then my path, if you will, went in directions that I could not have anticipated, and in areas of more spaciousness and openness and open-heartedness than I ever thought about when I first got interested in Zen and was just focusing on me, addressing my anxiety in large part. And one of the first things that I became aware of was the intimacy of personal relationships, and how that intimacy in a personal relationship could be very experienced in this practice. And it was my first week-long retreat, and I was sitting with the gentleman who was sitting next to me. I did not know at all, and he didn't know me. And we both I arrived early. I think he arrived a little bit late. Didn't get a chance to introduce myself, anything like that, before we started sitting. And I struggled mightily in that first week retreat with physical pain. And he seemed to do fine, as far as I could tell. But anyway, after it was over, I went up and introduced myself, and I just felt this kinship with him, this closeness with him. And he expressed the same thing. And I said, "Man, it's like we're best buddies." He goes, "Yeah, that's exactly the way I feel." And I'm like, "That is weird, though, because I don't know him." And my personality, by the way, I thought of myself as being very introverted, particularly as I started my practice. I had that label that I wore almost proudly. I'm introverted. I'm not comfortable meeting a bunch of people, introducing myself, stuff like that. So anyway, I was quite surprised that without talking to somebody, and I didn't spend a lot of time talking to him afterwards at all either, but I just felt like we were fast friends, and I felt a real relationship with him already. And I noticed then over time, and it's over the years, that I feel that way in other aspects of my life, certainly too. Just going to Safeway in the morning and picking up some milk or something like that, or whatever, or paying a toll at DIA, or whatever it might be. The things that I used to just completely, hey, this is just something that's in the way, this is kind of a nuisance, is where these kind of things became more and more recognizable to me and more important to me. And also just being outdoors, experiencing the wind on my face, the sun, the seeing squirrels in the yard, or bunny rabbits, or whatever, things like that. I felt like, man, I love you. And sometimes I'd even say it, outside, and certainly would want to engage people that I'd run into, strangers, rather than just kind of move along without it. And it wasn't anything I did in a calculated way, like, oh man, I want to be a good Zen student or something. It was just a natural thing that I started to notice about myself. And it was a slow process, but still was quite interesting to me and very rewarding, I might add. Made my life much more rich. Another thing, I've shared this story with a few of you before, but I want to share it from a different context of the fact that this is an example of how my life has been changed with practice. And this was a feeling of very strong connection. And this was when I was on a business trip. I was going to Dallas with the company that I worked for. And we were having a meeting there. People were there from all over North America. And we were a little bit late for the meeting. And so I was walking with my boss and one other person. We're walking down this hall. And, there's this, as we're walking, carrying on our conversation, we're walking pretty briskly to get to this meeting. But there was this really large spider that was going across the hall. And so my boss just said, "Can't get it, get it." So he wanted me to step on the spider, of course. So I was like, I was just like walking along like this, and then get it. Like putting my foot down, and it didn't go down. I didn't scrunch it. Well, it's not like, I want to be real. It's not like I hadn't killed spiders before in my life. Of course I had, and it certainly wasn't an emotional thing about, for my Zen practice, I don't want to ever kill a spider. It wasn't like that at all. But it was some sort of, in those conditions, that was the response, and I could not elicit the squash. It just didn't happen. And they were like, "Hey, thanks, where'd you go?" They thought I'd killed the spider, but I noticed, that he was unharmed, and then kept on going across the hall. But that was, again, one of those things that it wasn't like, okay, I'm going to adopt this lifestyle. I'm going to become a fundamentalist Buddhist, and I'm going to do everything I can to not do some of that. It was just the way I had become unknowingly, and that was somehow related to practice that I was involved with. Another thing that I began to see in my practice was that I was more accepting of who I am. I'd always been pretty tough critic, and certainly had a lot of feelings coupled with my anxiety and related to my anxiety, as a feeling that I think a lot of people have, which is just not good enough. I'm just really not quite smart enough. I'm not quite this, that, all that kind of stuff. So that was going on with me. So one of the things I was doing in my Zen practice, in the beginning for sure, was trying to become good enough. Okay, I'm not quite good enough. I'm not quite smart enough. I'm not quite gifted enough or friendly enough or whatever it might be. But boy, I got the trump card I can play. I can become enlightened. I can really wake up. That'll be quite the feather in my cap and thing to put on my resume. And so, although I don't know if Pepsi Cola would have really cared about that or not, might have held that against me. Who knows? But anyway, that was the way I felt. But as I was practicing, I also became more and more aware of my issues that I had. And they weren't all negative things. There were part of the things were my stinginess at times, my selfishness at times, but also my generosity at times. Also the fact that I was largely a loving person, but I also could get pissed off quickly. I could get angry quickly. There was a lot. It was all part of what I was, but I began to become more accepting of that for the first time in my life. And again, it wasn't something that I sat down with the Roshis and said, help me with this or something. It was just something that with their teachings and with having some rigor and structure in the practice that I began to notice some of these things. And I didn't come to the point where it was like, oh boy, I'm really getting better at this. It wasn't about getting better. It was just, I guess that my practice started to morph from being more of what I thought was a self-improvement program, which is what I set out to do, to eliminate my suffering and stuff, to this awareness program, just being more and more aware. And so I was noticing that I was noticing more things, and I was okay. I was okay with what I was noticing. And it was interesting that it brought back to me the first book I ever read on meditation, which was before I ever visited Great Mountain Zen Center. And I got this book at the tattered cover, and it's called Meditation Made Easy, and told you how to meditate. So I opened up this book, and it was pretty interesting. It told me what to do. It said sit still, sit in a chair on the floor. It doesn't make any difference. You can even lie down if you want to. And then it said, now just do that that was the only instruction you gave. And then it just said, do that for 2 minutes, right? So I timed on my chronograph watch, 2 minutes. And then it said, then you're supposed to turn the page. So I turned the page, and it said, congratulations, you just meditated perfectly. And that was the perfect thing for me to hear at that point. Because keep in mind, I didn't know anything about Zen. I'd never been to Zen Center, didn't have a teacher or anything like that. But I did want some kind of help. And the idea that maybe I wasn't broken as much as I thought I was, that was very appealing to me. I was really okay. And I don't know why I believed this author, but I got the book at the tattered cover. So I guess I thought it was a credible source. And so that was very, very helpful. And I think, not sure I would have stayed with any of this stuff if I didn't have some kind of a message received about the fact that I really was okay. So what does that have to do with this about the more accepting of who I am? Is that it made it, easier for me to shift from practicing to be something that I wasn't, to try to be like this Buddha type, and I'm using a term kind of loosely there, but to be somebody like Shakyamuni that's just setting the bar so incredibly high and failing miserably at that, to, oh, wait a minute, I can shift from trying to be something I'm not to just being what I am. And I can just really maybe, as I'm already starting to do through my meditation practice, I can start to come to terms with that and open up to that and open up my heart to that instead of running away from that. And that was such a turning point, because then I was, that was really, it was like almost like me starting then to really meditate, because then I could open up to anything on the cushion, off the cushion, pretty much. And when it was sad stuff, I could be sad. When it was stuff that I was more joyous about, I could do that. And in between, it felt like the pressure was off. And the other thing that did was it made me a heck of a lot more compassionate about myself and others, because I saw clearly my own challenges as far as the way I wanted to be, which was this totally generous, caring, and loving individual, and the ways that I could be, quite different from that. I could be disenfranchised. I could be, angry. I could be, as I say, selfish. I could be, jealous, different things like that. So that helped me be compassionate with myself, and also helped me certainly be much more compassionate with others. In fact, I remember sitting on a plane on a trip, and this gentleman sitting next to me reading the Wall Street Journal, and he's saying, like, can you believe those like idiots in Washington? I mean, God, if they could just run this country like a goddamn business, how hard would that be? That was what he's saying. And my initial thing was to just think, man, give me a break, you whatever, And then I was just kind of being aware that, yeah, there I go, feeling like I've got to judge somebody else, not knowing his story at all. One of the things too that began to happen is I felt much less pressure to be a certain way in the Zazen practice. I didn't have to do Zazen in a particular way or particular manner per se as far as expectations. What I could just do was do Zazen. Just do it. Just do it. And I could do that. I could sit my butt on the cushion and do Zazen. Now I might have squirmed some, or I might have been in some pain, but I could still do that. And that became the thing that I really, really focused on. And I'd do that every day. And I did do it every day. When I first started meditating, I wanted to not miss a day for 6 months, and I didn't. It just became like brushing my teeth. In fact, it became such a habit that I remember asking Yugen Sensei, I was like, do you think I should should I skip some days just to be sure I was okay, doing that? Would that be okay? Or would I fall to pieces if I did that, or whatever like that? And he said it was, certainly what I needed to hear at the time was, he said, it's kind of like, you're kind of like asking me, do I have to breathe all the time? Do I have to eat all the time? Do I have to go to the bathroom every day? Like that. He goes, it's just kind of part of being a human being, and and what you need to do to really live, and to be what you really are as a human, as a Buddha, whatever. And so took that to heart. I did skip a couple of days anyway, just to see what that was what that was going to feel like, and it turned out that was not a big deal, and then I could come back to it easily. But again, just not having the pressure that I had to attain something on Zazen, but just doing it, and just experiencing my life that way. Shishin Roshi tells a story a lot about a snake, in a bamboo rod, and how a snake in a bamboo rod, that's the way it can kind of feel who it is, what its shape is. And that was what was happening for me, certainly with Zazen experience, and with some sesshin experience and things like I had, was beginning to see, a little bit more feel when I was uncomfortable, but still in this particular place where I had to sit a certain way, or structured sort of protocols that we followed in Zen retreats, things like that. That was very, 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 very helpful. And got, I remember heard this in some talk, but it started to feel so right, this idea of kind of a Zazen doing Zazen. It wasn't something I had to do, just being what I was. That was just doing Zazen or Kinhin, or these kinds of things, or other activities in life for that matter. And Roshi Shinko, one of the things that she said any number of times through the years, and she said, I heard her recently say it too, was this notion of, we can always just, in our practice, we can always just drop into emptiness. We don't have to mystify it. We don't have to think about, okay, what is exactly, form is emptiness, and emptiness is form, but they're not exactly the same. So we don't have to go there. That can be very helpful working with a teacher. But the other thing is, we can just be here, just drop in anytime we want to. One of the other things that I noticed was that, and still do, certainly, became less interested in existential kind of questions. I worked for the last, I guess, for about the last 5 years in hospice. I just recently retired, but up until a couple of weeks ago, I was working in hospice, and being with families, working with families, and talking to patients, not uncommon at all for them to offer up questions like, what really is the meaning of life? What do you think? And want to get insights from somebody. And those kind of questions, to me, are understandable. I've certainly had those kind of questions, still do, can shoot and be interested at times in shooting the breeze about it, but don't hold a lot of interest. Whereas earlier that would have held a lot more interest, but it seems like it's kind of not even asking the right question, because this just being able to go sit on the cushion, or just being able to clean the toilet, or clean, empty the compost, whatever it is, that's pretty, kind of helpful to me as far as living my life, as opposed to having all these kind of questions. And there was something I read or heard, maybe it was heard on the internet or something, from Joko, and she was asked by a student what the meaning of life was. And she said, "Oh, I can answer that. And philosophers have been dealing with that for centuries, but I can tell you exactly what the meaning of life is. The meaning is what? It's what you're doing, straightening the pencils on your desk. Oh, that's what, all these kind of things that she was getting that point. And I won't belabor it. That would be the last thing she'd be wanting me to do. But that was kind of her answer to it, just being, just living our life. Another thing that I noticed from my past, that was some thing that I was really hung up on, was having to be right about stuff, having to be right. And I had a discussion one time with my brother about who the host of College Bowl TV show was, and I thought it was this guy whose name I can't remember, and he thought it was Alan Ludden. These are names from the past, a host of TV shows. And so we got in this argument about it. My brother and I have a very close relationship. That was probably like the biggest argument we ever had. And anyway, my mom was concerned, and she wrote Parade magazine and asked who the host was, and it turned out that the host had been at different times both of these two individuals. It's kind of like, okay, the whole right wrong thing is gets a little bit ridiculous. So anyway, that doesn't seem quite as important. Another thing that seemed kind of that came up for me was when I was years ago, I had a friend who was very interested in his own longevity, and he joined an organization where they reduced their number of calories, and they were very, very skinny people. And the idea was that some tests with mice had shown that if you restricted caloric intake, you could live to be, you could live to be over 100, right? And that's what he wanted to do, is live to be over 100. And again, that kind of seems like, at the one time I thought, oh yeah, living to be older, that'd be great or whatever. And of course now I have, say of course, I have pretty much zero interest in that at all, because what's the hackneyed phrase? You're born in the present, live in the present, and die in the present. That's why they call it a gift or whatever. But that is pretty much the deal. And also having worked in hospice and seeing people that are struggling mightily at the end of their life, it doesn't seem so great to just think that longevity as a thing, as a concept, is something that I would strive for. Would it be neat to get to see my grandkids graduate from high school or even college today? Yeah, it'd be neat, but certainly not necessary. But what is important is maybe that I can be with my grandkids at times now, enjoy those times or whatever. One of the things in practice that I certainly I struggle with all these things, by the way, that I'm talking about. It's not like oh yeah, now I don't have any of these issues. Give me a break. Talk to the Roshis. They could tell you I've got tons of issues. But the point is, I'm just working with them. I'm practicing doing the best I can, and maybe a little bit more compassionate with myself about these things. But one thing too is to begin to let go of some of the images of myself. It's very easy for me to still think of myself that, oh, I'm really anxiety ridden. I'm a hardcore type A personality. Whatever. These different concepts I have about who I am. Well, those may not be particularly accurate anymore. And yet it's almost like it's comfortable to think that I'm a person that's got anxiety issues, or I have this or that, or, and really don't significantly anymore, thankfully. But it's still sometimes think of myself that way. So again, this notion of being able to let go of more different kinds of things over time, and not getting stuck in patterns that, oh, I dealt with certain kinds of trauma in my youth, and boy, that's really I'm really victimized by that. Well, I did deal with trauma, different types when I was young, but it's really not defining who I am anymore, for sure. And so that kind of thing too, but sometimes easy for me to think in some of those ways still. Talking about going back to that thing about knowing things, like Joko saying, I know the meaning of life. What the meaning of life is, it's the what or whatever. I know she was being a bit cute with that, but at the same time, I was thinking about and this example, like when I lived in the Nether, wanting to know things and really feeling like I could intellectually know things. When I lived in the Netherlands, the typical breakfast was to take this chocolate sprinkles and put it on a piece of bread. That was a classic breakfast in the morning. Is a bunch of chocolate and bread, and the chocolate's called hagelslag, and it's a big Dutch thing, and just about every family there, at least somebody's eating that every morning. And so I remember before I got the nerve to try that, I was kind of like, that seems really weird, And when I tried to describe it to people here, it was not. It sounded awfully odd that people would do that. Anyway, certainly when we do try something like that and actually taste it, experience it, then we know what it is. You know what Hagelslag is, or you know what drinking orange juice is like if you've never drunk orange juice, or you know what Vegemite tastes like if you've never had that in Australia or whatever like that. But until you do, you can't really know it, but then you do know it, and then it's not really worth arguing about. And so I think about that, that idea of not knowing is it's central in our practice, certainly coming from a place of not knowing, and about the only thing I think probably can know is these direct experience kind of things like that, as opposed to what's going to happen after I die, or why is the world the way it is, or why are we not taking care of the planet, or those kind of things. Anyway, one of the other things I just wanted to mention is that this practice it's not easy, and I talked about having compassion for ourselves and compassion for others, and a lot of people quit the practice for all kinds of reasons, and then a lot of people that quit come back, and I would think my projection would be that probably the reason a lot of people quit is that, first of all, it's hard, and it takes a lot of compassion to be with ourselves, to be able to hang in there through some of the trying times and challenges of this practice. So I think that's certainly something that I continue to work with and will continue to work with in my own practice, is to be compassionate with myself and compassionate with others. And I would encourage you all to do that as well, because it's so easy to, at some point in our life, at some point in our practice, come up with something that just seems so challenging, so daunting, that we just can't deal with it. And so rather than be there with it and just accept that we can't deal with it at this point in time, just to hit the eject button and leave. Nothing wrong with that, but it's not necessarily helpful from a practice standpoint if we do that. So anyway, I think in closing, practice is I think it's a two-way street. I think there's a lot of energy and effort we can put into, which is so important, and having that discipline and structure to do that. And then I do think, and I wouldn't pretend to understand it, but I do think that somehow as we do that and throw ourselves into it more and more, that practice kind of practices us as well. And that's the kind of intangible going on there. But we practice, and then the practice changes us too, and changes us at times in ways that we would not have anticipated. And this changing, of course, is always going on. None of this stuff I've talked about is fixed. None of my feelings about it aren't fixed. None of it is. And there's nothing to be sought after about any of this. And everyone's going to have slightly different things that have been things that have affected them from their practice. It's going on all the time. All we can do is kind of let go and observe, and let go some more, and just keep experiencing. But all this is the idea that we are all Buddhas. We are all Buddhas. That's not BS. That's what we are. And it's not like we're saying that we're some supernatural thing by saying that. We're human. We're human, which is in a sense pretty dang supernatural anyway. And so we're Buddhas, and we have the ability to continue to see more and more clearly what exactly that means, and to live our life as the Buddhas. And it's things like taking out the trash, it's walking the dog, it's cleaning up the compost, it's brushing our teeth, it's walking, it's sitting, it's sleeping, it's peeing, it's pooping, it's helping somebody when they're hurt, it's feeling down, it's feeling excited, it's feeling bummed out, it's being depressed, it's being hopeful, it's being argumentative, it's being it's loving, it's being frustrated, it's killing, it's anxious, it's tranquil. This is our life. This is this life as the Buddha. And fortunately, we have each other to lean on and be supported by in this in this practice. So as Shishin Roshi says, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's not get fixed. Let's not get stuck. Let's keep going and support each other and do our very best and do the very best in this particularly special Rohatsu here at Maitreya Abbey.